Yes, everybody, welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another daily drop. I'm Jacob Turner. He's THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for a Carolina basketball related drop in. I mean, to sum it up in just a quick sentence, we're here to show Hubert Davis some love. I know we've been critical in the past of certain things, lack of bench production, maybe lack of adjustments in game. And I would say it's pretty easy to see over the past week or so, in particular with Carolina's last two games against Kentucky and then this Wednesday against Oklahoma, that we've seen some changes in that department, really specifically focusing on Wednesday night's win over the Sooners. We've seen Hubert make more adjustments. I know you're going to talk on it more, but again, as an outlet that covers the team, we've had to criticize Hubert in the past, but we have to also give him his flowers when he deserves it as well. So let's talk about the adjustments and what specifically you saw on Wednesday night, because I know you told me off camera you thought it might be his best coaching performance as the Carolina coach since he took over.
There's been criticism about Hubert being stubborn, and I think some of it's justified, but also maybe stubborn is not the right word. Mm-hmm. There's a commitment that coaches have to their evolutionary process of what they see their team becoming. And because basketball plays so many more games than football, we tend to see that more and associate it more with basketball coaches. But sometimes guys have to try something with their team. And they could tweak, or as Hubert says, tweak, pivot, and alter when things aren't working, or when they recognize something may be good in one game, it doesn't really work too well in another game. And I think that's what we're watching Hubert do a little bit here. So you go from Kentucky, where UConn and Kentucky, where their switching was abused, period. And then you go to Oklahoma, which is one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country. Carolina changed how it approached the switching some. David Sisk's film review of that game is outstanding.
Oh, it's elite.
And he illustrates some examples of Armando and not switching at the top and actually retreating and recovering, dropping in coverage. So Armando would drop with his man instead of switching with the guard and the guard dropping with his man. There weren't as many mismatches with guards on Oklahoma bigs as there were with guards on Kentucky bigs, guards on UConn bigs. And those two teams have better bigs. So those were really bad situations, matchups for the Tar Heels. Oklahoma's got some good bigs. I mean, Hughley went for 15 against Carolina the Dean Dome 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. He didn't score the other night. Part of that was Armando was just outstanding in so many areas. But part of it also was the change in defensive approach. And because of that, I thought that Carolina stayed in front of the ball better and forced Oklahoma to maybe take a couple more dribbles on offense than they wanted to, because sometimes when you switch, and it's a loose switch, and I think sometimes they've had very loose, soft switches, you could directly drive into the lane. You can beat the guy on the switch because that dude's recovering onto you. That's what a switch basically is. Or you could pull up and shoot a shot. We've seen that a lot. But they did a good job getting around the screens. And maybe the screens weren't so great because teams were like, look, they're going to switch. So let's take advantage of the switching process, and the screen's not really going to be as effective. So our advantage is beating the switch instead of taking advantage of the screen. The screen just forces the switch. And what happened the other night was some of the screens weren't great by Oklahoma. Carolina was getting around them, and they were forcing a couple more dribbles, which allowed the big Armando, in most cases, time to drop in coverage and stay with this guy. So as a result, Oklahoma only attempted 14 layups the other night, whereas Kentucky attempted, I think, 26. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge difference. And that was a tactical change that Hubert made. So I think that he deserves some credit for that. And the fans that are critical about, boy, this is just all looking the same again, we're heading the same direction as last year, that was a coach recognizing some things and making a switch, making a change. We'll see if he does that moving forward. But I thought it worked, and it's no coincidence, to be honest with you, Jacob, that was their best defensive performance of the season. And I thought that was one of their scrappiest, stingiest performances of the Hubert Davis era on that end of the court. So credit him for doing that. And maybe that's how they play moving forward. I'm a big fan of getting over the screen. I'm not a big fan of switching. And I don't think you should ever switch with a 1, 2, and a 5. Never. There are some circumstances where you have to, and it's sort of in the flow. But as a tactical point, you should avoid it at all costs as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt about it. And building off that, AJ, one other in particular adjustment that I think we've seen, because the last time we did a basketball show, we spent a big chunk of that podcast talking about lack of rotation on the bench. And is this becoming a theme again? Is this becoming a problem again for North Carolina? And I think if you look at the last 2 games against Kentucky and Oklahoma, I think you're seeing positive strides in the right direction for Hubert in terms of his bench play. Jalen Withers in particular, 19 plus minutes against Kentucky, didn't play as much against Oklahoma, but you had Zayden High coming in and playing 12 plus minutes. Seth Trimble's the guy on the bench that's getting most of the minutes over there. 16 against Kentucky, and I think he played even more, 22 minutes against Oklahoma as well. So you're seeing guys being used in spots. Jalen Washington playing around 5 to 8 minutes. Still needs to develop in some areas. I think you can understand that. Wojcik's been the guy that maybe isn't playing as much, but when you look at maybe what he's bringing to the team in the last couple of weeks, then you can kind of understand that. So I do think that bench can continue to be developed, but from this podcast to the last one we did, when we spent a lot of time criticizing, again, I think we need to give him a little bit of praise and a little bit of positive feedback in terms of that, because I think we've seen some improvements in that area as well. Do you agree with that, or am I maybe reaching a little bit?
No. I think that the bench is a layering process. Yeah, and we all saw the team from a 30,000 foot view until they started playing games. Hubert saw them much closer. And our assumption was, boy, he's going to go 10 deep all these games, because you see guys that can play. But a lot of reserves can play, but maybe they're better used situationally. And one of the things I did say back in the preseason, I said, I think they got guys here where you're going to see them play 22 one night and 6 the next. And we're seeing that with Withers in the last couple of games. Mm-hmm. But here are a couple of things about his use of the bench. And I guess the one absolute is Seth Trimble. This is not an Iron 5 team now. Trimble's going to play every game, and he has shown that he can help in every game. He is an offensive weapon. He can shoot the perimeter shot. He works so hard on his shot. His shot looks different. Look at the video of his 3 the other night and go back and look at the 3 he attempted against Notre Dame and South Bend last year. Yep. Just look at those 2. That's all you need to do. Mm-hmm. And there's a tremendous difference. And credit to him for busting his rear in the gym, because it's the only way it changes. It doesn't happen because you wish for it. It doesn't happen. Your form's different on your shot and your release is different. That's a guy who changed a shot he had taken for years in one off season and changed it dramatically. So he could drive to the lane and score, but he does so many other things, and he's a vitality guy. This team's got a lot more vitality dudes than it had last year for sure. For sure. So he's the 6th man. And he's going to play between 14 and 20, 22 minutes every game. And by the way, his 22 minutes the other night was the second most he's played in a game. I think he played 25 against Arkansas. But let's remember, Cormac Ryan didn't play that game. So a lot of those minutes were Cormac's minutes. Mm-hmm. So to show you how far Trimble's come along and how much Hubert trusts him, he played 22 against Oklahoma on a night that Ryan played about 30 minutes. So that's how Seth's game has grown, and Hubert's right there along with it. He's not holding it back. He's allowing his game to continue to grow. He's giving it a lot of breathing room, and he's helping the team out every time he plays. Now, you mentioned Withers against Kentucky, 19 minutes, and he was plus 13 on the floor that game. Yep. 4 minutes the other night, struggled a little bit, but Zayden High gave them a lot of instant life. I tweeted out during the game that it seemed like every time the ball was around the baseline from maybe 6 feet outside the lane on one side to the other, and the ball was on the floor near the baseline, High was there. He showed them something the other night that we've seen snippets of before, but because he got more extended minutes, we saw him lose himself in the game. And one of the things I do I've seen this for years when you cover games in person that you don't get to see when you watch on TV, is a lot of times the guy who's a reserve or someone who's struggling, when there's a dead ball and they're getting into whatever inbound set they have on offense or defense, and the horn sounds, and it's obviously a subs coming in, Zayden High 2 weeks ago would look over his shoulder. Mm-hmm. Subs coming in for me. Mm-hmm. And guys that are doing it because they're not confident they're not playing great, and they're used to coming out of the game. They're used to not playing long stints. At one point the other night, it was in the second half, I believe it was, where the horn sounded and High didn't look over. That's a huge, huge step forward. Mm-hmm. Because here's a guy who in the previous 7 games, he had played 5 of them for a total of 11 minutes. And he played 12 the other night. He knew he was playing well. He knew he was positively affecting the team. He had lost himself in the game, I think, for the first time since he got to Carolina. And he really, really helped the team a lot. Didn't score, didn't matter. He got 3 rebounds. He didn't rack up a lot of stats, but my goodness, if you can have a statistic for positively affecting a scenario or a possession on either side, on either end of the court, he would have graded out very well on the defensive end, and he would have had a nice little stat sheet there. So Hubert went with him. He recognized this and went with him. So the bench allows him, because of the variety of guys that are there, to do that. And I will also give Hubert this much credit too. He went with Jalen Washington in the second half too. Mm-hmm. So Washington played in both halves. And sometimes he'll play in the first and maybe doesn't get in the second, especially in closer games. People want to see more of him, but it's going to take some time. He's still learning how to bang. He didn't play for a couple of years. And basically 3 years, because he didn't really play last year. So he's still adapting to the physicality. He's got to drink. He's got to eat some more spinach. I say drink it. For sure. I look like he would just drink it.
For sure.
And he's got to defend better. But he can help the team offensively. And Hubert is putting him in some of those spots. So I think one of the most interesting things about this team is going to be to see how Hubert continues to use the bench moving forward. Trimble's the absolute, but who's the flavor of the day? The other night it was High. Against Kentucky, it was Withers. In the previous 2 games before that against FSU in UConn, outside of Trimble, it was nobody, because the bench played a combined 71 minutes. But they've been at 47 and 44 the last 2 games, which means somebody else is getting 10 or 12 minutes. And what that does is that extends your bench. And it's not just a matter of giving starters rest, but you're playing guys situationally so they're positively affecting the game other than just spelling somebody. Mm-hmm. Sometimes starter or bench guys go in, reserves go in to spell someone, and you just don't want them to hurt the game. But what's happening is Withers against Kentucky, High against Oklahoma, they help the game. They help the team. They enhance things. And that's a pretty good sign moving forward. And Hubert saw that, and he ran with both of them. So that's a good sign moving forward. I've said good sign moving forward like 6 times, by the way.
Hey, man, that's the moral. That's the moral of this podcast. If we take anything away, again, we're going to criticize when we feel like we need to criticize, and again, we're gonna give credit when it's due as well, because that's what you do as an outlet covering the team. So, and I think Hubert deserves credit in particular for what he did on Wednesday night against Oklahoma. And from a Carolina fan perspective, long may that continue going into the rest of the season. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another daily drop brought to you by TarHeelIllustrated.com. You guys know what to do. Make sure you like, make sure you share it, and make sure you subscribe as well. We upload a ton every week, as everybody knows, especially in season. So hit the notification bell too if you want to be notified every single time we upload as well. We appreciate y'all watching as always, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.